Good morning, well, or afternoon, or wherever you happen to be in the world. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. This video is going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk a little bit of welders today, and not these welders, off-road welders. The Ready Welder, which is a spool gun. The Premier Power Welder, which is a stick welder. And the Carnage Welder, which is a self-contained wire feed welder. I got a whole bunch of people asking me questions about our little welding repair on the trail on that last video out in Moab, where we welded those control arms with some wrenches on them to keep them from refolding every time he hit a bump. And so I thought I'd do a little video about the onboard welders that we were using. And just as a side note, we had, I think, 10 vehicles on that trail. There were 4 welders in that group. So we had no issue at all with being able to stick some metal back together. First of all, to disclose, I am not a certified welder in any way, shape, or form. I'm a retired mechanic that happens to know how to weld. The stuff I stick together pretty much stays stuck together too. I tend to burn stuff in a little bit hot, but that's just me. I don't like stuff falling apart when I've worked on it. So, off-road welders, portable welders. I've used 4 different ones. I own 2. One of them I made, the other one I bought. The other 2 I've used on the trail that someone else has owned. So I'm going to talk about those 4 today. There's 2 styles of welders I've used off-road. One, traditional stick welding. The other is a wire feed. Now, off-road, I don't have any bottles of gas, so I can't do any true MIG welding. The wire feed we're using off-road has a flux core to it, so it's not as clean as a traditional MIG welder. The other style of welder I've used off-road is stick welding, which is more traditional welding. Now, there's a big difference between the two as far as if you're gonna go buy a welder, a couple things you probably ought to know. First thing is, if you're gonna use a stick welder, you're probably gonna wanna learn how to stick weld first, get some practice in, understand what rod works with what metal. Now, my buddy Zane, the guy that you saw welding the control arms with a stick welder in the video, he carries like 7 different rods with him because he stick welds. And he's actually very good at it. He understands how to stick weld. He's got a lot of time in learning how to do that. So he does a really nice job trail welding with a stick welder. If you're brand new to welding, it may not be for you. It does take quite a bit of practice and some knowledge to learn how to weld very well with a stick. I originally learned how to weld with stick welding, so I am capable of it. I don't like it as well as wire feed. Wire feed's easy. Which brings me to wire feed welders. If you're a new welder or just learning, pretty much anyone can wire feed weld. Pull the trigger and let her burn. There's not a lot to it. You don't have to worry about which rod to use. It's a wire being fed through this thing with a bunch of heat and some flux. So those are the big differences right there, right off the top of my head. So now I want to talk a little bit about the welders you can buy, or the only one that I didn't buy, I just made, that we've used off-road. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is a stick welding system, and it didn't require much. A ground, a positive lead. There are ends on these cables so that I can bolt them to batteries. Now, you do require 2 batteries wired in series to bump the voltage up so you can draw a lot of amps off of them, and not a lot of control though. When I'm talking series batteries together, this is what I'm talking about. So this is the welder. You take one 12-volt battery's negative, it goes to the welder. You take your positive to your negative of the first battery to the second battery, then your positive to your welder. What this does is it bumps it up to 24 volts and gives you the amperage to weld. Now, pretty much any of these welders will require this if you're going to run it off the vehicle, with the exception of the Premier Power Welder. The Premier Power Welder has a really high output alternator to generate the electricity you need to stick weld. Depending on what you're using, you're going to need two batteries series together like I just showed you there. Now, I've carried sets of leads in my black Jeep, my crawler Jeep, for ever. And when I built that Jeep, I'm running two batteries in that Jeep so that I can, all by myself, weld if I need to. Most people aren't carrying dual batteries, so you can pull batteries out of two different Jeeps. You do want to make sure you fully disconnect the batteries that you're using to weld with, because you are creating a short. Now, the vehicle you're welding on, it doesn't care if the battery is connected or not. Generally, you're supposed to disconnect them, but I've never fried a computer by welding on a vehicle. I have fried a computer by using the batteries on that vehicle because I missed a ground wire. I didn't fully disconnect it, my own fault. And when I started welding, I welded that drive shaft back together and not only fried the computer, but I burned the prom chip clean out of it. If you're going to use your own batteries, make sure you disconnect everything. Yeah, that wasn't a good day. I not only bought a computer, I had to go to the junkyard and yank a prom chip out. And, good news is my weld held up. Now, when I was doing stick welding, the big caution is don't run your batteries all the way dead or you won't be able to start your vehicle. Or when you pull batteries out of multiple vehicles, set them on the ground, series them together, do your welding. If you have to do enough welding to where your batteries are dead, make sure you have another vehicle in the group to jumpstart y'all. That is also true for Ready Welder if you're going to use the Carnage without using the internal batteries or your welding leads. Now, if you're using a Premier Power Welder, those have an alternator that puts out bazillion amps to supply the conversion box and inverter box. It's a self-contained unit, but you do have to have that vehicle running and the alternator running to operate that welder. But the upside is you don't have to have multiple battery series together. So that's kind of an advantage for the Premier Power Welder. The advantage for things like the Ready Welder or the set of leads is they're very lightweight, very small, and easy to travel with. Carnage is kind of that way too. Now the Carnage welder, it kind of set itself apart because it's got two AGM batteries internal that are inside the little suitcase. And I can just pick that suitcase up, walk over to the vehicle, and start welding on it. That to me was the advantage of the Carnage welder. That was the actual reason I bought that welder, because I didn't have to get my vehicle close. I didn't have to wire a bunch of stuff to go weld an emergency repair. I could just take my little suitcase welder over there and weld it. Now the downside is that suitcase weighs 46 pounds. It's heavy, and you know it. I mean, you better, have a place to put it that it's not going to bounce around much. There's advantages and disadvantages to all these. Premier Power Welder, it's a good working welder. It really is. It comes with like 25-foot leads. It comes with the box and the alternator. They work very well. They've been tested time and time again. So, the downside is you have to know how to stick weld, and you have to get the vehicle close enough or within the 25 feet of the leads to work on it. and your vehicle has to be running that has the power welder on it. Whereas the Carnage or the rest of this stuff, you don't have to have a running vehicle, you just have to have the battery, or the Carnage has to have a full charge in its battery. Now, just focusing on these stick welders. Now, a Premier Power Welder, like I said, comes with the alternator, it comes with a box which has, it's basically an inverter to control the voltage and amperage. And the control part of it is huge. You control the output of the alternator with the throttle. It has a throttle that you install with the welder. You can adjust the amp output of the welder. It gives you a lot of control as to how much heat you're putting through the leads. Whereas running just a set of leads, you have almost no control. The longer the leads, the lower the heat's going to be because it takes energy to go through the leads. I used to carry short leads because it was less to carry. You have very little control when you're just carrying a set of leads. So in my opinion, carrying a set of leads and some rods is basically a temporary repair no matter how you look at it, because you're probably going to have to go home and clean up some crappy looking welds, but it'll get you off the trail. And I will say, it has gotten not only me, but several other people off the trail. Just a set of leads, I've welded links together, I've welded frames back together, I've welded drive shafts back together, things like that. Now, when you're using something like a Premier Power Welder, you have enough control that if you know what you're doing, that can be a permanent repair. And again, we've welded frames back together, and we actually carried some pieces of plate and cleaned it up and fish plated frames back together, and the guy we did that to never went and got anything else done. It was a permanent repair. We didn't have to do anything else. So on the stick welder side, the Premier Power Welder is better than carrying leads as far as a quality weld, a quality repair, and more versatile. When we switch over to the wire feed welders, now these are similar to MIG welders, but it's flux core wire. So it is not clean welding like my little Miller machine in here. It's flux core wire, so it is a little dirtier. It does have slag when you're done welding. Now, the Ready welder, you do have to series batteries together, period. That's how it works. It does not have its own self-contained batteries. On the upside, it does have a port that you can hook up MIG gas for it, and I don't know anyone carrying a bottle of argon CO2, but you could take it home and actual MIG weld with it too. But you do have to have a series of batteries connected to it. It's a spool gun, so instead of having just the little MIG head, it's got a spool attached to it as such, and it's a little bulkier. So that part of it, doesn't fit in quite as tight of places as just a MIG head does, but it's a good welder, cost effective. You just have to make sure you have enough people with you to series a couple batteries. And, you can weld through such a range of amperage that, again, these are permanent repairs when you're using these manufactured welders. Now, the Carnage welder, shown here, which is the one I've been showing here and the one you saw me weld with on the trail, the advantage to it is, again, it's got the 2 AGM batteries. I can just pick it up and go over and weld. The disadvantage is if you have a long weld to do, you're going to have to series batteries together because you'll kill the batteries in the Carnage. But to get to that point, it's a pretty bad repair. Now, when we were welding on this last trail repair, Carnage advertised that, hey, this thing will weld, 4 or 5 feet, 1/4 inch plate, 15, 20 minute weld time. And I got about 5 minutes of weld time and the batteries were acting like they were dead. So I was a little irritated at that point because I couldn't finish the last link. We had to get out the Premier Power Welder and finish that last link. But I called Carnage up and said, okay, am I doing something wrong here? What's going on? Actually, I've been emailing them back and forth. And I will say their customer service is great. He got back to me right away and said, we got to check your batteries independently. He told me how to do that. And he said, it sounds like the batteries are okay, but they're out of sync. Now, how they do that, I don't know. So I charged the batteries back up independently, put everything back together, retested the welder, and I welded 2 feet, a 1/4 inch plate, no problem. So there are faults with everything. The batteries, if you have a problem with the batteries, your self-contained battery deal isn't going to work so good. But I'm back to full operation with the Carnage welder. And worst case scenario, like I said, if those batteries do go dead while you're welding a repair, you can always series it together. It comes with the leads to do that as well. So I think there's advantages to all the welders. If you've never welded before or you have very little experience, go with a wire feed. You'll be able to patch yourself together and get off the trail. If you've got some welding experience and you know how to stick weld, pick whatever you like using. I still carry leads in one of my vehicles because I'm never without a welder off-road anymore. But the thing I do like about the Carnage is I can put the little suitcase in my Cherokee, I can put it in my crawler Jeep, I can put it in the FC, I can put it in my tow vehicle, it moves to any vehicle. Premier Power Welder, you're kind of stuck with whatever it's in. Your leads, you're going to need multiple batteries, so you kind of got to judge that for what it is. There's my quick video on the 4 welding systems I have used off-road. If it didn't answer any questions for you, hopefully at least it gave you enough information to get confused and go do some research. But outside of throwing a set of leads in your truck and just winging it, the manufacturers, the 3 manufactured welders I've used off-road, all of them work well. Pick the one that's going to work for your needs. Do a little research and practice with it before you're on the trail. Good idea, huh? Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and throw me your comments on this one. Tell me what you think.
That's in there.
Well, we got a couple of wrenches welded to this thing. It'll get them off the trail. Back, back. He's under the. He's climbing it. That was funny.
Brought that trail back, didn't we?
Park. Need this hard driver to come up. It'll feel looky. Keep going.
Come back drive a little bit, right there.
that way, but sure.
Am I clear of people?
Hey, watch out, it's coming up. Yeah. Lower lane. Yeah. Now if you back off straight, you can bump it a little bit.